Well, I think we will go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. For those who I've not met, my name is Mitch Bagley with the Insurance Collaboration, and I will be the moderator for today's industry webinar, steering through post-COVID mortality shifts, socioeconomic gaps, plus ICSL data insurers and employers must see. And I think the idea around the industry webinar today, our team had the privilege of presenting at the Association of Home Office Underwriters Conference in Austin, Texas, a few months ago. And we really wanted to share our insights and we really wanted to share our insights with the rest of the industry. So really appreciate the very talented group of speakers we have from the collaboration as well as a guest speaker, Dale Hall, as well. Just a brief disclaimer, the Insurance Collaboration to Save Lives is a nonprofit. We are doing our best to bring our research insights to help better educate the industry on what's going on with mortality and morbidity post-pandemic and bring actionable strategies to mitigate the risks that we will go over here today. The leaders presenting today, we really want to appreciate, I really want to send a special thank you to Dale Hall, our guest speaker today. Dale is the managing director of research for the Society of Actuaries Research Institute. If you do not follow him on LinkedIn, I would highly recommend giving him a follow to follow the latest trends that he and his great team at the Society of Actuaries are doing with respect to the latest trends in the industry. From the Insurance Collaboration Group, Mary Pat Campbell, Vice President of Insurance Research at Conning. Mary Pat has been a tremendous leader for us on our actuarial team and our steering committee for the past over 3 years now. So thank you to all the work that you have done, Mary Pat. Steve Saborn, CEO of Humaculture. Steve is the ICSL product and innovation team leader, and as well a great advisor for our actuarial team for the last 3 years as well. And not last but certainly not least, Teresa Weiner, who is the chief actuary for the state of Georgia's Commissioner of Insurance. Teresa is a board member at the Insurance Collaboration as well as our treasurer and serves on our actuarial team. So thank you all for presenting here today. And with that, I'd like to pass it off to Dale Hall, who will start our presentation. Dale?
Okay, thanks, Mitch. Hey, thanks for the opportunity to highlight some of our SOA research work here. As Mitch was noting, we gave a set of presentations to the Home Office Underwriters Group, and I thought it was helpful to take a look at, what's happening in population mortality trends. But really, in turn, we want to see how those relate to what's going on in the insurance industry. So on this first slide, I think we're just starting with what we maybe see in some of the mainstream headlines over the past 6 months. This news flash that relates to U.S. population mortality results. As you may know, the CDC puts out annual reports about mortality in the population across the entire U.S. The most recent, broad annual report came out earlier this year, compiled information through calendar year 2024. They do put out things, more routinely, kind of quarter by quarter. So there's actually some information that, now goes through probably the second, third quarter of 2025. It certainly showed that mortality in general has returned back to pre-COVID levels and beyond. On the right-hand side of the screen there, you see where one statistic, life expectancy, that measure is back to where we were pre-COVID. I'll note life expectancy, not my favorite measure. We're certainly going to take a look at, more of a mortality or age-adjusted deaths per 100,000 view. So let's go to the next slide. I put that kind of trend on the next slide here, what those trends are. Starting back to around 2010 or so. Also in the last few years included a little bit of coloring there so you can see some of the deaths are coming from COVID as a cause, those colors on the right-hand side of those bars. That fortunately has essentially whittled down to almost zero, if non-existent in 2024. And here again, you see, we're essentially back across the full population to where we were 2019. That's, positive, helpful news. I think clearly maybe there's a little bit of glass half empty there. If you would have drawn a line from the top of the screen down to the bottom, like, oh, well, where should we have been had the pandemic not occurred? You'd probably say, oh, we should be more like it, under 700 deaths per 100,000. Again, 2024, not a bad number. I think we'll talk about, this through the whole presentation, even some of the lingering effects that might be happening caused by cause. This is definitely the answer for the full population. There are some age groups that are actually materially better than what the rates were in 2019. Some are still, trying to catch up. Again, this is like across the full population. One of the headlines as well is on opioids. So on the next slide, if you take even one drill down deeper into causes of death, opioid trends, these accidental drug overdose deaths that they measure, mainly driven by a lot of opioids, they're on a positive downturn. Still obviously elevated relative to about 10 years ago, but I think some of the, public education, the prominence now of Narcan as, a way to combat against those overdoses, really helpful. Things have dropped from 2023 to 2024. They dropped over 26%. I think there's, some continuing on of that trend. We'd love to get it back to the low levels that we might have seen 10 years ago. On the next slide, then, I think going even broader across the full population, we at the Research Institute often like to take a look at the socioeconomic effects of mortality. It's one thing to look at the full population, but if you want to get deeper into what are insurance trends or pension trends or group life trends, then it's better to start to look at some subdivisions of the full population. The US market, is big, right? It's 330 million people. We now have over 3 million deaths a year in this market. It's a really diverse market for sure. So we have some methodology that we developed here at the SOA to talk about county level socioeconomic scores and then look at mortality in those counties and then compare how is like the bottom 20% or the next 20%, comparing to the full aggregation. And here's some of those historical results. They're pre-COVID. They're maybe go keep on this slide just for 1 second there. Yeah, you can kind of see in 1999 that maybe there was certainly some diversity of results, but it's also widened a little bit over time. I think most of our individual life clients are likely in the top two quintiles here. There's some variability of how diseases and medical improvements and access to healthcare play out. You can actually look in some cases at this report almost disease by disease. But yeah, then on the next slide, let's take a look at socioeconomic ideas, taking it one step further. I mean, this map shows essentially the counties that are in the top three deciles. They're in the 8, 9, 10 range. These are places that have, generally much higher incomes. They are more higher on education. Probably most of the life and retirement products sold are somewhere in the 7 through 10 range, maybe into 6. I used to work at a Farm Bureau insurance company. We were probably more middle market, maybe more in the 6, 7 range when it comes to economics across the country. But when you look at these, you can kind of see where the prominence is. Obviously, the East Coast, some major Midwest cities. The West Coast is where some of these highest socioeconomic counties are. I think it's interesting to see too. I'm a little bit of a historian, so we can kind of look at the next slide at how things change over time. Here is a county, Forsyth County, Georgia. When we did this scoring, we've actually done it retroactively back to 1980. It was actually in the third out of 10 deciles, and now it ranks 10 out of 10. I mean, if you're familiar with this county, a little bit northeast of Atlanta, I'm sure some of us on the call, have some familiarity here. Decades ago, pretty quiet, pretty rural, maybe relatively poor, lower income county, grown into one of the wealthiest and fastest growing counties in the US. Interstates and state routes have directly connected it to Atlanta's job centers. There's a lot of in-migration from other states. I think when we looked at some of the details, like over 60% of the residents that are there now had really no connection to this county dating back to the mid 1990s. There's been a lot of movement here, and it quickly that spurs, incomes and education and healthcare. And, if you've been through there, lots of hospital systems and things like that, top ranked public schools, major tech and business areas for sure. So, and so that just shows that, there's a little bit of variability that goes on even within a county. At the other end of the spectrum, maybe on the next slide, we see population coming from the first three deciles in socioeconomics. This actually sums up to the same amount of people. It looks bigger because these counties have lower population, but it tends to be lower income, lower education, higher unemployment. Some of these places might be over 100 miles to the closest hospital system. And so you see the pattern of where that might be. And maybe a different example, kind of close to where I live on the next slide. Here's DeKalb County in Illinois. Not a bad place to live. It's just that socioeconomics has certainly changed over the last 40 years. In the 1980s, this was a huge hotbed of agriculture and automotive industry and, seeds and farming equipment. Northern Illinois University was a huge growing university there. And 40 years later, it's not like it's gone down in its GDP or economics, just grown at a much, much slower pace. Industry has changed. There's been more of a population migration, less demand for healthcare. Some of the universities now, like Illinois State and U of I, have grown to be much bigger than Northern Illinois has. Centers like Rockford, Bloomington Normal, Chicago have grown to be the economic powers surrounding it. So just, those types of things happen and have an impact, socially on what happens with healthcare, with mortality, with trends, things like that. I think the next slide is a little bit just showing also some of the mortality trends relating what we see in that full population to what mortality trends are in the insured population. I'm always a big fan of trying to tie those two together. And the top line you see here is almost a little bit of a restatement of the population mortality. It is more on a crude basis. So previously we we're looking at adjusting for age. Since the US is a little bit of an aging population, if you just do deaths into population, that number is going to grow while you see that crude rate actually increasing over time. But then you can compare it either to data that we have at the SOA, or if you went through the exercise of pulling everyone's annual statements for individual life together. We've done that exercise a couple times and look at what crude individual life mortality trends in. You'll see the bottom line underneath it. And if you hit the next slide, it just puts another axis in to show what the percentage of those two are. It kind of stays in generally in around that 50% level. I'm actually a little probably surprised that percentage didn't change radically during the COVID era. I would have guessed that the COVID pandemic at the start, hey, this is going to be, much more harsh on people who have little or smaller access to healthcare, maybe less less financial ability to seek out healthcare. But that really wasn't true across the spectrum. We saw that individual life claims had a similar relative bump compared to the full population crude rate, and that's something that I'm sure will continue to track over time. We follow what's going on in insured mortality thanks to all the companies out there who are contributing to the NAIC, which then we get to study in the aggregate here at the SOA. And so the final ideas here, the next slide will highlight some recent presentations that we've done to the NAIC as recently as March. We're taking that industry data and then showing how it relates back to at least a common standard, in this case, the 2015 VBT. I mean, that, is a number of years ago. So it's no surprise that some of these numbers are in recent times more in the 80-85% range. But it follows that trend. We're now kind of back in the insured population to where we were pre-pandemic, hanging around the mid 80s relative to a common standard. We'll probably add 2024 onto this here recently as well. may lead to, and I think LATIF will start to consider, is this enough information to suggest we would like to do a new valuation basic table? And if in turn, and stemming from that, would there be a point where we new have a new Commissioner Standard Ordinary table or a set of EBT tables, for future information? I think the last thing to note here too is we're big on the last slide that I have on just illustrating longevity and mortality risks to even to the general public. If you've seen our actuarial longevity illustrator at longevityillustrator.org, it's a great partnership we have for the U.S. and we have this in other markets as well, but I'll focus on the U.S. here with the American Academy. Rated a top longevity tool by the Wall Street Journal recently. Just trying to get more in the public mindset, the longevity risk that they potentially can carry as they're thinking about planning for and thinking through not outliving risks in their retirement age. So, answer a couple simple questions on your health status. If you want to add a second person, a spouse or a partner there, you can add a joint contingency as well, and encourage you to go take a look at that. So, Mitch, that whole concept of what we're looking at population-wise, the socioeconomic differences, how that can translate down into insured observations, kind of a helpful part of what we're doing here at the SOA. And I guess I'll pass it next to Mary Pat to take on that information and drive even down further from here.
Thanks, Dale. There we go. So we're going to start at the high level and then get into some of the detail with regards to cause of death. So I'm not really disputing what Dale was showing, that we're back to normal post-pandemic. What I'm showing in this graph, this is month by month looking at, and it had to be normalized because each month has a different number of days, average of deaths per day, and comparing against the year 2019, same month, because there's a seasonality to deaths. There's more deaths in the winter than the summer usually. If you look at 2019, it was a very boring year, no real bad seasonal flu. So if we ignore the pandemic, and the dashed line, by the way, is kind of that average percentage for the entire year. If we get past 2020 and 2021, which were 18% higher, 21% higher than 2019, we're looking in the post-pandemic years or post-ish pandemic years of 2023, 2024, 2025, it was still 7 to 8% higher than 2019. So something is still persisting. Some of that is those external causes of death. Dale was showing drug overdoses, but again, in 2024 and 2025, those did come way down. There still are persistent causes of death, or as we will see, some that have been increasing in rate. Next one. So here, these are not the very top causes, which are heart disease and cancer. I'll talk about those in a bit, but these are pretty high on the ranking tables. Stroke has actually increased on the ranking table recently, and you can kind of see it here. That's the very heavy black line on the graph. And what we've seen in the pandemic specifically, yes, it went up 2020, 2021 heavily, but it has remained elevated post-pandemic and has been at a higher ranking level than it used to be. We can also see one of the causes, chronic lower respiratory disease, has gone lower. And that includes causes such as emphysema, and that's smoking linked. These are all age-adjusted death rates, so instead of the crude rate. So this is not related to the aging of the population. I had two other causes of death that are all also on the top 10 often, Alzheimer's disease and diabetes, which had a bump up during the pandemic, but you can also see they had elevated levels, or at least Alzheimer's, pre-pandemic. There's some longer term trends that are going on here with some causes of death that may be influencing what's also going on. This is the general population, may also influence what's happening in the insured population. So now I want to talk about cancer. Cancer has been the number 2 cause of death in the US for decades. but it has been steadily improving. If we go back to the 1999, go 1999 to 2025, steadily improving even through the pandemic. However, if you disaggregate it by type of cancer, you might see why. It's because lung cancer, which has been the predominant cause of cancer mortality, it dominates everything. And of course, one of the things that really drives the lung cancer mortality rates was smoking incidence, which peaked decades ago. It's probably leveled off by now. I've heard some bad trends recently about uptake in smoking. I'll push that to the side. However, if we look at other types of cancer, I highlighted colon and pancreas specifically. There's some other types of cancer, such as breast, that there's been other trends going on there. But let's just focus on colon and pancreatic cancer mortality trends specifically and disaggregate there and see what's been going on with them. So these graphs are different. The vertical axes are logarithmic. If you look, it says 1, 10, 100, 1000. So these are not like your normal linear scales. And so this is so that we can actually see these curves all on the same scale. Don't worry, we'll go back to a linear scale in a moment. If you look at these, colorectal cancer mortality at the older ages, it's actually been improving. The death rates have been going down. However, at the younger ages, 25 to 44, for colorectal, it's been going up. So we'll stick a pin in that for right now. For pancreatic cancer, it's really difficult to eyeball this, but I will tell you, and we will see this in the next slide. For younger ages, there's not much of a trend, but for the older ages, it's actually been increasing. So let's go to the next slide so we can actually see this. So I took the ones where it's increasing for both. So for colorectal cancer mortality, this is early onset cancer, and this has been going on for decades. This has been noted by oncologists for quite some time, and it has been considered in the research. They think it relates to obesity. However, many of the people who have early onset colorectal cancer have not been obese. I will drop that. Consider other environmental factors and dietary. So that's a possibility. On the right, pancreatic cancer, the increasing mortality rates over there, and it is for 65 and older. So colorectal cancer, younger ages, and it's been aggressive. Generally, we don't screen for under age 45. For pancreatic cancer, we don't have good screening tests for that. And unfortunately, many times it's caught when it's already rather advanced. But it is more at older ages, though, again, sometimes you have early onset there as well. So these are just two specific cancers, but early onset cancers and aggressive cancers for mortality and incidence have been on the rise in the US. And it has been long-term, and there have been short-term trends as well that have been noticed in the general population. So these are some of the trends that we have noticed. I'm going to hand it over to Steve to talk about some of the other trends we have noticed.
Oops, sorry, I was muted. So thanks, Mary Pat. That was some great data and great insight you provided. What I'd like to do is look at some of the trends beyond mortality to show that this is not just a mortality issue. In fact, we've been looking at the trends for the same conditions that were driving increased mortality, what's happening in healthcare and disability as well. And this is a look at the civilian labor force rate among workers that is up 40% and remains elevated well into 2026. And I believe the latest monthly release hit a new record high. And so this is a very broad and sustained phenomenon that we're seeing. And when we look at the broader labor force, not just the workers, the trend is the same. And you can see that this is continuing, and it's rather significant severe. And then this definition of disability that BLS is using is a loss of activity of daily living. And they do surveys of households to determine this, and they've been doing this consistently for a few decades. This macro trend kind of sets the stage for some of the plan-specific data that I'm going to look at, that I've analyzed with my own client data. And I think it highlights that the traditional reactive approaches or pharmacy-first approaches are not working. And this tragic rate is something we must address through earlier root cause interventions. So this is an analysis that I conducted for a very large employer with over 100,000 employees. I looked at their 23 to 24 data. I mapped it to the same conditions, diagnosis codes that we've been looking at that was driving elevated mortality in the 21 through 23 time period. And what this highlights is that these conditions are continuing, and I'd say perhaps even accelerating the healthcare driven costs. So when we were looking at this, look at the nervous and neurological issues, they're up 44%. And then cancer is up 25%. Metabolic and digestive is up 15%. And that includes all your diabetes, et cetera. But and the nervous and neurological is not looking at necessarily the stress, anxiety, depression that a lot of people think of when they think about mental health. These are fundamental healthcare, like structural issues that people are facing, like dementia and demyelating MS and demyelating issues. So those are things that are structurally deteriorating in people. And then cardiac and circulatory is up 9%. So these aren't just random. These aren't just random events. Something in our opinion has shifted in the population and needs to be addressed. And the pharmacy first approach that is in the current healthcare system, I don't think is necessarily fixing this. We got to keep people from getting to this state if we're going to really make an impact on this. All right, let's go to the next slide. So this is looking at another employer client of ours that had 27,000 employees, and we do the actuarial for their short-term disability, voluntary short-term disability plan. And we categorize their data into three buckets. Those that we said were pandemic related. We looked at musculoskeletal. We looked at other causes. This right here is what the data, the lost days per thousand, looking at the 5 years pre-2020 and then the 5 years post-2020. And what you can see here is that those categories, those conditions that we identified that were driving elevated mortality are also leading to 142% increase in the lost days per thousand for this population. Let's click the next. Looking at MSK, this is up 31%, which is generally a big driver of disability. But this isn't necessarily, there isn't a big spike at 2020. It was a trend that started before and continues to go up. And this is a restaurant business, so they could very well be just some deterioration or maybe some opportunities for mitigating that risk elsewhere. But this next one I want to highlight is all the other conditions, and you can see that it's been declining. And and so when you look at, if you were to look at this in total, it would look like there's no impact here, because that third category is decreasing so much that it's offsetting the increases in the other two categories. And let's go to the next slide. And this is a breakdown of the diagnoses codes, the ICD groups that we were looking at, and how we categorize them. And you can see that the pandemic related had pretty significant increases across the board, with the exception of circulatory disease. And when we look at the other, though, one of the things I want to highlight is the pregnancy. pregnancy is usually about a third of the claims, and you can see that that's down 29%. And there's quite a bit of research that's indicating that people have been having a more difficult time getting and sustaining pregnancy over the last several years. So that's a big reason for the offsetting reduction in the disabilities, which is why if you're looking at this data in total, it may not look like you're seeing a big increase in disabilities overall, but there is something underlying that you need to be looking at for your population. Very similar to when you're looking at cancers, you might not see the increase if you're including the breast and lung cancers. So this data, I'd say, validates the national disability norms that we were looking at, and it's something that we need to really look at in greater detail. But the good news is that we now have some practical tools and expanded biomarker panels that we'll be talking about that helps with the member screening to identify these rising categories early and to intervene with targeted lifestyle first approaches, which is the foundation of the Forward Living Integrative Platform model that I'll be discussing in a little bit. Let me turn it over to Teresa next.
Right. We have this slide about proactive targeted loss mitigation. And life and health insurers can really come together because it's a large industry. They have a strong understanding of risks. So we're thinking that pairing with other partners, you can do some voluntary screening and engage your customers, your insurers, even your employees. Screen them, test them, and then once the test results are there, to classify and triage them. And then when there's several intervention paths, some may be very simple, like take a vitamin D. I mean, something very low cost solutions that people are just not aware. They may be deficient in vitamin B, so forth. So we're trying to promote that through ICSL. And this is not a real busy slide, but I think it's just super important. I have a lot of comments from it because it was a fabulous interview with Kimberly Palopoulos at Swiss Re. And I wrote down some things after looking at my notes, but I didn't want to miss a lot of the important concepts that she shared. And I watched it a couple of times. I highly recommend. There's the link there. But it seems, alarming that we hear this stat a lot, but we kind of get used to it, that over 50% of the people in our population are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. I mean, 12% diabetic. And I recently heard a comedian, a little clip, and he said, my doctor told me I'm pre-diabetic. So what? I'm pre-death, I'm pre-whatever. Just let me know when I actually have a condition. But that's, it was a joke, but it's really kind of sad because almost everybody's accepting that, well, we're all going to get diabetes, or a big number of us are headed that way. And she quoted Kimberly that 70% of our population's obese or overweight. At least around 50% have insulin resistance to some degree. And so, the stats are not looking very well for our population. And as insurance groups, that ICSL came together, and as several people volunteer from different sides of the business, and just having that strong understanding of risk, Kimberly pointed out that we have this world-class risk insights, and to be able to pair those with tools and with partners to help move the needle. When you think about the life insurance industry, 14 trillion of individual life in force and over 8 trillion of group life. And then when you compare that with, how much has been done really on the wellness side, and it's such a great opportunity. It would help the public image. It would help the life insurance bottom line, death claims as well as disability. So, and of course, the insurance companies, the place beyond your friends and family. Kimberly pointed out that the care that you're going to live a longer life. So, and the insurers, instead of all starting their own programs, already partners exist that have already created some wheels to start with. And so carriers could offer support and cost share with these items with prevention and intervention plans. And I believe it would generate a lot of goodwill for the industry. And another thing is partnering with someone that's a nonprofit that alleviates the fears that people have. The insurance company will be taking this data, for suspicious uses against them. And so there's a lot of, lack of trust with the insurance industry. And so I think partnerships are really the way to go, personally, to get people to buy in. Okay, so the next slide. These are under expansion. We have a website now with 3 different choices on there. You can go right away and you can sign up and see the test for yourself. And what happened is we have trying to gauge the risk reward of the different tests, because it can be expensive testing. You don't want to over test. You don't want to, create more false positives and create more and more testing. So what we have someone, volunteer in ICSL, Kate Hendricks. She's an MD. She worked with the CDC over 12 years. She was a medical officer there. She worked as a chief public health officer in Texas. She knows quite a bit of this research and the hazard ratios and what has the best payback. She did a webinar, excuse me, with us on vitamin D, which is, like I said, a really simple thing that was discovered during COVID. The low vitamin D individuals were hit harder by COVID. So a lot of these other tests are what we have evaluated as having a good return. We have a lot of studies on this, trying to capture for a decent price. And so a lot of thought has already gone into this to develop the wheel. You can look at the bottom bullet there on the footnote. We do not collect any revenue from this at all. We get a discount on this and we make it available on our website. And we're investigating more packages that will work well. And we feel like this would be a good way to go with the insurance industry. Of course, you get a lot back on your heart conditions because that's number 1 cause of death. If you're a life insurer, you might want to focus on that. So you can develop these packages in different ways. Some of these, like vitamin D, look at the has impact on all of these items. So we do look into these to make the best testing options available that we can see. Next slide. Okay. So what happened was when it first started this, we had many volunteers with ICSL, and we just said, let's do it ourselves, do a test group. And we had a donor who paid for a lot of tests for us, which was great. And this is something that insurers could subsidize as well, where we found out amongst just our group, which we had no idea, many of us, that we had markers for cardiac markers, inflammation, and these many things can be checked out. I mean, these are not just, something minor. A lot of these are very troubling. Also, the vitamins, like I said, B12, and other Bs and some Ds, we had a significant number that are low. And the doctors are not testing for this on a regular basis, so you would have to seek this out on your own. Also, these metabolic disease, which of course, due to the insulin problems and that we talked about earlier, that Kimberly had pointed out, that we have overweight, we have lifestyle issues that are leading to this overweight that have more implications. We did partner with a company called GOMO, which has done a lot of great development of an app that does change behavioral patterns, which is so difficult. And they are having a lot of success with this. And we have a relationship with that firm. The biomarkers, of course, during the time we tested was shortly after COVID, so we had more of COVID issues but people may still have these with long COVID. So some of these are still worth testing for people because there are actions that can be taken to improve these conditions. Okay. So we are moving to another speaker.
Steve.
Unmute. Sorry about that.
Sorry, Steve.
All right. So this is a visual. This visual is a conceptual bridge from the data to solutions. And we use it to reinforce the integrated first approach and the key principle for organic gardening, which is feed the soil, not the plant. While our current healthcare system focuses on treating the symptoms or conditions, creating a pharmaceutical dependency cycle, we're trying to break that pharmaceutical dependency cycle. While the current system ignores the underlying issues that result in the need for a prescription drug, we would like to address the underlying causes for the health issues. The root causes manifest into the cancers, the autoimmune diseases, the cardiovascular disease, et cetera. And our approach, we want to prioritize integrative health solutions that are built on 3 promises: that's effectual or tangible, patient-reported outcome measured, that has impact. Personal, we want them to resonate and have sustained engagement. And then we also want them to be financially viable and sustainable. The panels really are designed to help us measure the soil conditions. So we can intervene with lifestyle first, pharmacy second strategies that build innate immune resiliency to break that pharmaceutical dependency cycle. This is the foundation for everything that follows on the flip partnership that we're trying to build. Next. So as Teresa was showing earlier, the expanded layered cancer, the expanded layered risk framework that we're building out, we want to really look at protective factors through the acute risk or disease state. How do we identify those protective factors when they start deteriorating and keep them from evolving to the metabolic, to the inflammatory, and ultimately to the disease? And so for each of the conditions, we're undergoing a review to say, what are those protective factors that we should be looking at? And how do we keep people from even getting the disease? And for each of them, there's quite a significant relationship between those lifestyle connections and the development and progression of these disease states. In fact, I did a study for the Society of Actuaries developing a progression of health model for a wellness actuarial model back in like 2013, 2014. I think it was published ultimately. And so for this cancer layered cancer risk framework, you can see it at the column at the bottom that the World Cancer Research Fund says that 30 to 40% of cancers are preventable through lifestyle, essentially. And this is quite significant because they reviewed over 1,000 studies they had 70, I think they had over 100 researchers involved looking at the various researchers. And that was their high level finding, is that by simply getting to a healthy weight, getting regular physical activity and a nutrient dense diet, you could avoid 30 to 40% of cancers, which is rather significant. And for each of the other conditions, the World Health Organization, American Heart Association found that up to 80% of cardiovascular disease is preventable through lifestyle factors. The CDC in prevention said that up to 90% of type 2 diabetes and a large majority of other metabolic associated fatty liver disease and other cases are lifestyle related. The Lancet Commission on Dementia Prevention said that up to 40% of dementia cases worldwide may be attributable to modifiable risk factors. So we're building out these layered risk frameworks to help the industry look beyond just how do you treat the symptoms and get people on drugs and create that dependency cycle. We want to break that dependency cycle. Let's go to the next slide. And so to help support that, we're developing the Forward Living Integrative Platform, which is our way of helping push the market towards this integrative first approach. We've identified a mechanism for measuring and evaluating these solution providers, and we'd like to get a good panel. We want this to become the recognized platform for those solution providers that are focusing on an integrative health approach. And so each of these levels are based on what percentage of your protocols incorporate the lifestyle factors into your protocols, and how scalable you are, and are you looking at and evaluating patient-reported outcomes and reporting on that. So our goal is to identify and establish a platform for partners that will receive a ICSL seal of approval for the achieved level, and all tiers will have access to our global biomedical translational research network of insights. So we'd love to have you refer solution providers, or if you're a solution provider, to join. You can join even if you're not focusing on it now, but if you're committed to it, you could get into the incubator level by committing to being at least 50% within 18 months. So let's flip the market towards integrative health and get solution providers on here. And when they're on here, use them for helping to get your population healthier. I'll turn it back to Mitch to talk about a pilot that we're planning to run.
Well, as the audience can see, we have put from the insurance collaboration standpoint, we have put a lot of work and effort into researching the problem and trend analysis from a mortality morbidity standpoint, but we're also bringing solutions to the industry that can implement. And I want to, Teresa mentioned our partnership with Gomo Health that we announced a little over a year ago, which we are thrilled about from an engagement standpoint. Teresa also mentioned those that are interested in our test panels can go on our website today and look at those 3 different sets of blood tests that you can provide to your insureds, to employees, if you're an employer, or just your family members that are concerned about health. But we were really excited from an engagement to make it even more impactful and scalable. We partnered with Gomo Health, and to Gomo, as simply as I can put it, is a digital AI-based messaging system, text-based, email-based system that can reach that interacts with millions of people every day, and whether it's working through those in the testing journey, and then also, a big finding for us is once those that are interested in getting blood tests, how can we improve and change behaviors to really help curb these mortality and morbidity trends. And so we're thrilled that Gomo Health is in partnership with us has offered severely or a substantial discounted pilot offering through July 31st. We have the tiered system over here to the right. We're looking for, it would be great to have 5 or more insurers or employers sign up for a discounted pricing of looking at an implementation that would traditionally cost in the $400,000 or $500,000 range. We would do it at a fraction of that, at more towards the $50,000 to $75,000. And not only is this a great opportunity to provide, we can start small. We can start, with whether it's your own employees and extend out to policyholders, and build from there. And so not only is it a great opportunity to test its capabilities, but also you have the opportunity to be an industry leader in this. So we have an opportunity for those who want to partner with us in this to have an early adopter seat on the ICSL Forward Living Advisory Board, and really demonstrate your leadership and helping us address these, which we believe are urgent trends to reverse, not only for the industry, but also the health of our communities. And we welcome those who would like to learn more to please reach out to us, reach out to me on LinkedIn and elsewhere. We would really love to provide more background with this tremendous pilot offering and partner with you in this effort. Teresa, final slide.
Right. This is what I'm really proud of. I was one of the early grant applicants for the Actuarial Foundation mentoring program with schools. And now they're doing sponsoring research grants for students. And our ICSL partnered. Unfortunately, it's a really small program of the Actuarial Foundation there, but you can find it on the website, which is linked at the bottom of the slide. And the team that's just engaged young people, the team that won, we had a couple of members on ICSL that reviewed all the research and selected the winners, helped select the winners. And you can get the whole paper. Was GLP-1 related about, young people getting involved and interested also in turning around the situation and helping people live longer. So I think it's really exciting that the Actuarial Foundation is doing this, and we are happy to partner with them. And we appreciate any of the donations that you may have contributed. So hope you'll look up the paper and look into the program.
And thank you to our entire team that's been involved with this award. It's been really cool to see in the last 9 months. And a special thank you to Dayton Orwell, who has spearheaded this opportunity, and other from our actuarial group to be a part in partnership with the Actuarial Foundation with this. So thank you all for your help with this. And that concludes our webinar for today.